Welcome back to Digital Assets Daily. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are in your corner of the world. The IMF International Monetary Fund has an article labeled The Great Reset. Going into the article, my thanks to His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales and to Professor Schwab for bringing us together. Now is the time to think of what history would say about this crisis, and now is the time for all of us to define our own role. Will historians look back and say this was the moment of a great reversal? Today, we see very worrying signs. 170 countries are going to finish this year with a smaller economy than at the start of the year. And we already project that there will be more debt, bigger deficits, and more unemployment. There is a very high risk of more inequality and more poverty unless we act. So what would it take for historians to look back at this crisis as the moment of a great reset? From the perspective of the IMF, we have seen a massive injection of fiscal stimulus to help countries deal with the crises. And to shift gears for growth to return, it is of paramount importance that this growth should lead to a greener, smarter, fairer world in the future. It is possible to do this provided that we concentrate on the key elements of a recovery and act now. We don't need to wait. At the IMF, we see some tremendous opportunities. First, let me talk to you about green growth. Governments can put in place public investments and incentives for private investments that support low carbon and climate resilient growth. Many of these investments can lead to job-rich recovery. Think of planting mangroves, land restoration, reforestation, and insulating buildings. Think of the key sectors for reducing carbon intensity, where both the public and private sector can invest. I am particularly keen to take the advantage of the low oil prices as we see today to eliminate harmful subsidies and introduce a carbon price that would work as an incentive for future investments. Second, let me talk about smarter growth. We know the digital economy is the big winner of this crisis. But we must not allow the digital divide to widen so that some countries and communities fall further behind. This would bring more pain than gain in the future. So it is critical that institutions like the IMF support investments that will shrink the digital divide. Working in partnership with the World Bank and others, and we also need to think carefully about how to make sure the jump in growth and profitability in the digital sector leads to benefits that are shared across our societies. And that takes me to my third point, fairer growth. We know that if left to its own devices, this issue at hand is going to deepen inequality that has happened in prior pandemics. We can avoid this if we concentrate on investing in people in the social fabric of our societies, and access to opportunities and education for all, and in the expansion of social programs so we take care of the most vulnerable people. Then we can have a world that is better for everyone. I want to conclude with an example from the past. William Beveridge, in the midst of the Second World War, put forward his famous report in 1942 in which he projected how UK should address what he called the 5 giant evils. That famous Beveridge report led to a better country after the war, including the creation of the National Health Service that is saving so many lives today in the UK. And my institution, the IMF, was created at this time at the Bretton Woods Conference. So now is the moment to step up and use all the strength we have to turn the page. In the case of the IMF, we have a $1 trillion financial capacity and tremendous engagement on the policy side. This is the moment to decide that history will look back at this great reset, not the great reversal. And I want to say loud and clear, the best memorial we can build to those who have lost their lives in the issue at hand is to build a world that is greener, smarter, and fairer. As stated by Kristalina Georgieva, the managing director at the IMF. Now I want to go and break down a little bit in her article. She mentioned the greener, and we know they're talking about currency and digital asset. Let's go into a couple. I'm only going to discuss the ones that we're discussing here, as we have Ripple, and we have Ethereum, we have NEM, and we have Stellar. Of course, there are a few others you're going to see you might even be invested in there, but those are the ones we're seeing that are already working with central banks. And so I wanted to move on from there. So we've already shown now that those are the green ones: Ripple, NEM, Ethereum, and stellar. Now let's go down, she said, the Bretton Woods. What do we have in the Bretton Woods? We had the monetary system. The Bretton Woods was the first example of a fully negotiated monetary order intended to govern monetary relations among independent states. And what else did we have at the Bretton Woods system was the chief features of the Bretton Woods system were an obligation for each country to adopt a monetary policy that maintained its external exchange rates within 1% by tying its currency to gold, and the ability of the IMF to bridge temporary imbalances of payments. So again, Bretton Woods was tying the system to gold. What do we have currently? We have President Trump here over and over again. I just grabbed the first article. This happens to be from 2017. President Trump to replace the dollar with gold as the global currency to make America great again. And what do we have here? The IMF, one thing I want to point out with their SDR is the SDR was initially defined as equivalent to 0.888671 grams of fine gold, which at the time was also equivalent to $1. After the collapse of the Bretton Woods system, the SDR was refined as a basket of currencies. So as we've shown here, the IMF talking about the Great Reset, we know in 1971 where they removed the US dollar from the gold currency. We have here, we've shown the SDR based on the basket of currencies, which initially was based on 1 gram of gold or 0.88 grams of gold. We've shown here that they would like to take it back to a gold currency, and we have the initial Bretton Woods as she discussed in her speech, and the Bretton Woods conference being discussed in regards to gold. We have President Trump who would like to take the US dollar back to gold, and then we have his choice for the Federal Reserve pick, Judy Shelton. We'll play a quick video of her discussing going back to the gold standard.
So you mentioned the gold standard. I think you're quite well known for your stance on the gold standard. Would returning to a gold standard help the U.S. economy? Can you talk a little about your thoughts on that?
Well, I would say I don't see it so much as returning, but more of a back to the future.
Okay.
I think that what a gold standard stands for is monetary discipline for its own sake. That is, if money is supposed to be a unit of account and a reliable measure and a dependable store of value, it really shouldn't be subject to who's the chairman of the Federal Reserve. And I think that money needs to be stable and provide the foundation for productive economic growth. And when money is just a variable that financial markets toss around, or it's part of a derivatives formula, or it's part of someone speculating on currencies, it's not serving the private sector in the sense of providing that reliable unit of account so you can make plans. And under a gold standard, you did have that stability, and I think that's what's missing. And so I like the idea of a gold standard. I mean, it could be used in a very cryptocurrency way. The point is, do you have a unified money system so that when you talk about the international marketplace, everyone is playing on a level monetary playing field? And it's very important to have a rules-based approach. And that's why I'm advocating that we need to look at the virtues of a gold standard and try to come up with something much closer to matching those, and then I think we would have more solid economic growth.
And now, guys, I want to leave you with a final thought. Just one small positive thought in the morning can change your whole day. Again, guys, remember, this is not financial advice. It is for entertainment purposes only. Hit the like, share, and subscribe, and we will catch you in the next one.